Okay, we've taken our break, so let's continue now. Let's continue now, and let me just pause a moment and let you ask a couple questions regarding this whole process there. And let me start right here. Go ahead. Yeah, she claimed the authorship of that letter. I have no indication that ever happened. Of that letter to Henry there, A.R. Henry, there is no indication that ever happened. That she actually wrote that, no. No. Well, she claims to have authored some of her books. I think one of them is Steps to Christ, if I remember well. Well, you will find, with the CD-ROM now, it's very easy. You can go and take snippets of the writings of Ellen White in Steps to Christ, put those phrases in the CD-ROM, and then look when it happened for the first time, when it occurs for the first time in her writings, and it's way before the time of Fanny Bolton. So what Fanny Bolton's major problem is that this work of cutting and pasting and the guidance that she asked for and received from the Holy Spirit to do that kind of work, she calls that just as inspired as Ellen White did. And so therefore, she saw herself as being the author of these books and not Ellen White. That's where the problem was there with her. Yeah. Yes, Chris?
We say that she wrote 100,000 pages. Does that include this cutting and pasting compilations, or is that her own handwritten 100,000?
I don't know. I think it is handwritten pages of manuscript, 100,000. Not counting these cut and paste things. No, I think it is just the original manuscripts themselves. Yes. Yes.
Couldn't it affect the messages that she had written when the assistants copied and pasted and created a compilation? Is it possible that there are messages lost?
Well, the cutting and the pasting that happens is in compilations. I'm not sure I'm grabbing exactly what you're trying to say, though. Yes.
She wrote pages.
Yes.
And they weren't as consistent as we would like as far as her trains of thought.
Yes.
And whoever the assistant was took snippets here and snippets there and created a compilation.
Yes.
Is it possible that there were messages affected, if not lost, by that process?
Well, it's because, I would say no, because the cutting and pasting is a new document that is prepared from old documents.
Right, so in the compilation.
So in the compilations, like Desire of Ages, for example, or Christ Object Lessons, the message or parts, paragraphs of some chapters will find their origin in some other earlier writings of Ellen White. They're not, they were not necessarily written in the 1898 when Desire of Ages was published, but would have been written before that. So those are still in existence. So the message is still there in that sense. Okay? You had a question too.
I've heard people quote that she is the widest published author ever outside of the Bible. And then my question is, does the fact that there's been so many compilations, of course, that adds to her being such a wide published author.
That's right.
But does that discredit the validity of single authorship? Not that anybody else wrote it, but if there are so many people else helping in the process, will that then discredit her for being the single author of so many widely published?
You're asking a good question, and I wish somebody from the White Estate here were here to answer your question who would know a whole lot more. But I think we cannot discredit the fact that there are approximately 100,000 pages of handwritten manuscripts. And that's a lot of paper. That's a lot of ink and paper. So it's true that the compilations that are gathered from already existing material inflates the number of books and publications. That's very true. But there are a lot of authors who are the same too, who do work like that. And even more today, there are a lot of theologians who are prolific theologians. It's because They have a bank of manuscripts and of writings and of speeches they've made, and they draw from them, readapt them, publish them again, and it just the wheel keeps turning. It's phenomenal what some people can do, and computers certainly help it a whole lot. Yes, Andrew.
I have two questions, and both of them are in regards to credibility. One of them is, if she wasn't educated, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but if she wasn't educated, and if she had a very limited education, and she was very poor on grammar and physiology and whatever else, then that could affect her credibility. Is it true or not? And the second question is...
Well, let me start with one question at a time. Well, it's true. The question was, yeah, that's right, let's speak them loud when, particularly for the other end of the room. The question was, she had very limited formal education. And we acknowledge that grammar and punctuation and so on were deficiencies in her. Would that affect her credibility? And I would say, well, why would it affect her credibility? Because she recognized that she had these limitations, just like a lot of other people have these limitations too. You are reading books as textbooks in some of your classes that I guarantee you, if they had not been reworked by a literary assistant or a publisher, you would probably not have them. And so on. I happen to be the co-editor with my colleague of the Ellen White Encyclopedia. We've been working on for 5 years. We're coming to the end of the project, and I know that there are some big names in Adventism who have written some articles for us in this encyclopedia, and my friends, they don't know how to write. And big names. And wow, what a work we had to do to... I should put my name at the bottom of those articles. Or Jerry should, because Jerry is much more better than I am at editing and so on. But yeah, does that affect the credibility? No. But we acknowledge the limitations and the human frailty of who we are.
Well, the reason why I was saying that if I would be a surgeon, and I claim to be a good surgeon, and I mess up, somebody could sue me, and in this case, she claims to be a writer, and if she doesn't do a good job, that could affect some of her credibility.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, she claimed to have a gift of prophecy. And she claimed that she wanted to do her best to write what she had received from the Lord. She never claimed to be an excellent writer. She never claimed to be someone who had a gift of writing. She just claimed to be a messenger of the Lord and wanting to do her best.
The second question is in regard to it's still about articles for the journals.
Yes?
Because that kind of affects the credibility also.
Okay.
You can't claim you're a cook and a theologian and everything together.
All right. Did you hear the question? A little further back there. Point was, when you're a jack of all trades and you claim to have a message to say on various topics, health, theological, doctrinal issues, and so on, will that affect your credibility because you are so spread? Today, that's a big matter. Today, in our scholarly world, I have my field of expertise. It is Ellen White studies. It is also ecclesiology is the doctrine that I specialize in. And so these are my fields of expertise. And in today's scholarly world, were I one day to stand up and begin to talk about something in the Old Testament, people would say, oh, you're not an Old Testament scholar. Just sit down. That was not the case in the 19th century. First of all, the scholarly culture is very different. But there's also another factor here that comes in, is that Ellen White claimed to receive visions from God to guide her in some of her writings. So, but I think we need to be careful of not associating Ellen White with all the major fields. Ellen White never claimed to be a historian, but she did write on history. The Great Controversy, the first half of the Great Controversy is a history book. Or is it? How about it's an interpretation of history? That's what the great controversy is. She does say in the introduction, I have written about various facts that are fairly well known in Christian history. And then she continues and tells us what is the purpose of writing these historical facts. Some people want to look at the great controversy as a textbook in history. And I say, no, that's not proper to do, because she did not claim to be a historian, and people around her knew that very well. But what the great controversy is about is an interpretation of history. And that she claims to have validity and credibility to do that. Maybe we need to do the same thing with some other areas of Ellen White. She did receive some visions to guide her in writing her books on education, or counsels on education, her counsels on family living, counsels on health, and so on. She based those counsels on the information she had received from God. She got the help of some other people to help her put it together in a format, in a way that people could understand. And I think we need to leave it there as far as her credibility is concerned. Let's use her writings for the purpose they're intended to be, not for something that they're not intended to be. And that will take care of the issue of credibility, I think. There will always be, however, one last word on that, there will always be people who will read great controversy, and because, I don't know, a chapter on something is not as detailed or doesn't appear to be as accurate as it should be, because now, 100 years later, we've got more information on that particular event in history. These people will say, well, therefore she's not credible. She's not credible because that's not precise enough or accurate enough. Well, that's not the purpose of the writing of the book. That's not what she wrote the book for. She wrote it because she had a sense of wanting to illustrate the great controversy through these facts of history. So I think the issue of credibility will be taken care of if we take her books for what they're intended to be taken and not for what they're not intended to be taken. Okay, who's next? Yes?
For me, The Desire of Ages.
Speak loud.
The Desire of Ages has been a very important book in my life, and I always thought that she wrote it, just wrote it like a book. So this is interesting information that you're pointing out about it.
Okay.
Now I have two questions in there quick. Number one, did she actually write any parts of that book just on her own, just writing it off in the 1890s? And number two, one thing we talked about is the evolution of her writing.
Mm-hmm.
How in the 1840s she wrote, emphasized certain aspects, and then changed as naturally as any of us would throughout the course of our lives. Understanding this cut and paste concept, with that in mind, how do we understand the evolution of her writings? You see what I'm saying? Because if we're taking Desire of Ages as a book that's primarily composed of cut and paste from a period of 50 years, how can we then say that that's because it does seem to be a pretty standard style throughout the whole book. So my question is, how does that style, how do the evolution of writing translate within a book that's pretty much cut and paste?
Okay. What was the first question again?
The first question was whether any part that she actually just wrote out.
Oh, any parts that she actually wrote out. Well, it would be very interesting to look at the scrapbook itself that was used to do this cut and paste and to compile it together. That still exists. We have that at the Silver Spring office in Maryland. And some people have done that. They have studied the original manuscript, handwritten, with all the passages and the fill-in that she's written in between the paragraphs that were taken from other places. Those exist. So it's possible to do that kind of a study. There are sections of Desire of Ages that were written from scratch, had not been written before. And yes, but it's basically a compilation book. Now, how about the evolution of her style? Yes, Ellen White has evolved. Currently, for devotion, I'm reading Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1, which is the antecedent to Patriarchs and Prophets. And boy, I am very familiar with Patriarchs and Prophets. I've read it 2 or 3 times. I have never read Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1. First time I read it. And I'm saying, wow, this is different. The style is different. The sentences are different, shorter, crisper. The chapters are not even. Some chapters are 40 pages long, others are 3. Patriarchs and Prophets is more even. Some of the details that are found in Spirit of Prophecy are not found in Patriarchs and Prophets. Some applications and moral lessons that she's spinning out of the stories are not there. You'll find them in some other writings, but not in Patriarchs and Prophets. So I'm fascinated as I read, and I find that very interesting. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1 is written in 1870. Patriarchs and Prophets, 1891, so 20 years later. There's been some changes in between. And some of the emphases, it is a little different. The timeline is the same. She basically comments on the same facts, history, events of the Old Testament story. But the way she does it is different. Patriarchs and Prophets has a whole lot more Bible verses. She quotes from the Bible in Patriarchs and Prophets. She does not in Spirit of Prophecy. She will refer to it from memory, but there's not a quote from Scripture, quotation marks, and a Bible text. That's in Patriarchs, yes, not in Spirit of Prophecy. Same thing in Desire of Ages. Lots of Bible verses quoted with references, not in the Spirit of Prophecy volumes. So her style has evolved. It has changed, yes. And it's different. There's been some cut and paste taken from some other writings, but she has adapted it. She's changed it. The earlier versions of these books were geared basically to Seventh-day Adventists. The later Conflict of the Ages series, still for Adventists, of course, but she's got non-Adventists in mind, to sell the books through colporteurs. And so she's adapted her style there because of a different audience in mind also at the same time. So very, very good question there. The style has evolved. Yes? Oh, very good question. How about now? What's going on right now with the books of Ellen White? Compilations still come. They still are brought forward. Well, if you go to the very last page of the syllabus for today, of the class for today, it's about page, if you've printed it there, it's about page 20 out of 21. Thereabout. It's very close to the end, just before the conclusion. What is the role of the White estate today in the publication of Ellen White's books? What do they do? Basically 3 kinds of work that they do. They are not allowed to change anything. So all that they can do is basically a compilation, and they still happen. We still have compilations of Ellen White's books that are put together. One of the very recent one is a book on angels. Another one is a book on prayer, published in just currently, the last few years. Those are compilations. They've taken passages of Ellen White on the subject of prayer, put them together, made a book that is now a compilation. Very similar to the way Ellen White compiled books on education or on health in her days. There is a difference, though, that you may have noticed, if you've been careful to notice the differences in the compilations. Early compilations of Ellen White after her death tended to be short snippets, paragraphs of Ellen White on a particular topic. Counsels on Diets and Food is one of those. Very quick, little things, bing, 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 bang, on a particular subject. Nowadays, compilations tend to be long paragraphs. Whole segments of letters or chapters are quoted or reprinted from these passages. So the tendency has been shy away from the little things to have larger things. Another work of the White estate now in the publication of books is what we call condensed book, excuse me. Condensed book. Well, condensation, that's what it means, to boil down. Those books were more popular in the 80s than they are now. Abridged books are published also still today. Simplified books in easy English are still published. So they still do all kinds of work with her writings. Okay. Yes? Nobody. Nobody fills in the gaps now. No, not at all. What you will find, however, is in brackets at the beginning of a passage an editor's note, commentary, or as a footnote. You'll find some of those now. There is the thought that the unpublished letters and manuscripts of Ellen White, the ones you're reading for this project currently, there's a thought, there's a vote, in fact, that they all be published on a CD-ROM. In fact, the database is almost ready. Why are they not? It's because they have decided that for every one of these letters, there will be an editor's note explaining who the person is, the context, and what, if we can, what was this letter all about? Why was it written? Because as you have read, some letters are a little difficult. Some letters raise some questions. And just to send them out like this without explanation will cause more damage than good. I think that's the feeling at the moment. It's not a sense of hiding because you have access to everything. It's just an idea that if we're going to publish, then let's do it well. So that's what's happening. But there's no addition to what is being said. Friends? Sven, I'm sorry. Sven.
When I read, for instance, Councils on Diets and Foods, and I find a statement that I really like and I want to add it in my paper, would I then refer to Councils on Diets and Foods, or would I refer back to
the original?
To the original.
You can do either. You can do either. That's just fine. In Ellen White's studies, you can refer to any of the published references to that paragraph. Either the very early one, the very, very first one, or the latest one. It's just fine. Those of us who are in the field, we know how to find it if we need to. Go back to the original source. That's hard work, though. But so the references are... the CD-ROM has helped us a whole lot. Because you can take the same sentence or paragraph and you just put it in the search engine and all the references will appear. And you go to the earliest one. So it's possible to do that. Okay, well, there's a few minutes left. And let me say a few more things regarding this editorial process. And I do want to go with to talk about the handout I gave you as you came in. Ellen White had some other colleagues too. And that, Andrew, will answer a little bit more of your question regarding credibility. Ellen White had some colleagues, professional colleagues, who helped her with some of her writings. For example, writings on health. She did write a lot on health. And sometimes she would ask doctors, physicians, Kellogg, Paulson, and others to read her manuscripts, to give her some feedback, so that for various reasons. One of them would be, does it make sense? Do you understand what is trying to be said? Will people understand what I'm trying to say? So they helped her with that. One of them where Kellogg helped a lot was in Christian temperance and Bible hygiene. And the segment there, in some segments there, he helped her. Here's what was said regarding this here at the very introduction of Christian temperance and Bible hygiene. The work of compilation has been done under the supervision of Mrs. White by a committee appointed by her for the purpose, and the manuscript has been carefully examined by her. So for that little book, people helped her compiling it, but she supervised the kind of work. Prescott also helped her in the education documents that she put forth, and also with quotes and historical references in the great controversy. He helped her with that. So she did have help from some professionals to help her make sure that her books had better credibility and could be better accepted in those fields. Let me go to the handout that you have. On the handout that you have here, let me walk through it with you. I know that the first page is a little difficult because it is a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. So after a while, it becomes difficult. But I think you can make out the first sentence. Read along with me. This is a manuscript of Ellen White written in Australia in 1896. Just stay with me, please. 1896, October. Ellen White writes this in Australia. Sunday evening, there's a comma there. October 4, I, according to appointment, had met with the church at Ashfield, and so on. WCW, that must be her son, went to meet and so on. So it's a little difficult to read. I think the original would have been a whole lot better. I think what I need to do is just go back to the original and make a brand new photocopy and start scratch. But but just visually, look at it. It is one whole single paragraph, very little punctuation. The capitalization is doubtful. And, it looks a little difficult, isn't it? Okay. Now turn the page. This is the same document on the other side. This is the very same document, but this time it has been typed. It has been typed verbatim, as it is. But as it was typed, the literary assistant put some commas and some periods, but basically there is one single paragraph still. There are no paragraph divisions. It is very, very, very close. Now the second thing that you see here happening is that the editorial assistant is doing something. And now you see all the circles and the arrows, and you see the words being inserted or suggested, or the phrases are reshaped a little bit, or sometimes it's a big bit. You see that there's some work being done there on the typewritten manuscript. The editorial assistant here, I'm not told who it is, took the time after typing it to suggest some rearrangements so that it would flow better. So instead of starting the sentence with Sunday evening, October 4, that reference is moved to the end of that first sentence. W.C. White went to meet his appointment at the Parameta. She added a comma that was not in the original and added the conjunction there. And there was no one at Ashfield to assist him. So a little bit of editorial work is done there to make it flow better. It's hard to read. It's just the sense is missing a little bit. And so on. A little later in the letter, in the same page there, you see that the editorial assistant is suggesting not only to rephrase some things, but to move phrases around. You see circles are made and then arrows are used to move things around, up and down. And it goes on like this. At the very bottom of that page, the editorial assistant is recommending scratching 3 lines. You see that? There's a scratch through 3 lines, completely scratched. And then it continues, and so on. Well, it seems that Ellen White approved of all of this. The manuscript was retyped. And then if you go to the 3rd page, you have it as manuscript 30A, 1896, as we know it now, and also as it was printed some years later in the devotional book called In Heavenly Places, page 174. Now, this is only sections of it. It's not all of the letter. Like the references at the very beginning there to going to this church or that church is not there. It's just the substance that is spiritually uplifting is being left. But you see the end result of those 2 paragraphs at the top of page 174 is basically that part of that manuscript. But you see the work that has been done by the editorial assistant. It has been reshaped. It's been worked on. And you can tell that Ellen White's original manuscript, the very first one, was hard to read. Punctuation was missing, and so on. The editorial assistant made it look better so that it would be more useful. Okay, you following? Any questions on that example? It's a very good one. There's a lot of work being done on on that page there. But it shows what has been done under her supervision. What would we say? What would we say? Oh, you haven't heard my question yet. What would we say if we were just to publish in print a letter of Ellen White as it is in the very first original there, this one? That we would publish it just like that. Type it up with no punctuation, not good capitalization of words, no paragraphs, sentences don't make sense. What would we say if we did that?
Fire the editor.
We would say,
Fire the editor.
fire the editor. Or we would say, we claim she's a prophet, and she writes like this? Come on. Because in the back of everybody's mind, a prophet has to be perfect. Isn't it true? A prophet has to be perfect. Well, they're not. Exactly right. They're not. But we have the context that a prophet has to be perfect. So, Ellen White was conscious of this. Very, very conscious of this. And she felt like she needed the help for all the reasons we've mentioned so far this afternoon. Let's look at another example. Go to page 4 of your handout. This one is on the landscape side. This letter is written, let's go to the right hand. It's this one that looks like this. Handwritten on the right and typed or printed on the left. This one. We recognize the handwriting. It is Ellen White's handwriting. It's from a letter, 1871, written from Battle Creek, Michigan. It is addressed to Dear Brother Loughborough. I hereby testify in the fear of God that the charges of Miles Grant, and Mrs. Burdick, and others published and so on in the crisis. So we see the handwriting there. We see the sentences. We kind of see a little bit of punctuation. And there's a paragraph. We see that one. We see that paragraph. At the very bottom, we see another paragraph beginning. But it's not too sure in that second paragraph where the sentences end or finish. That does not seem to be too clear. But in any case, if you compare to what has been printed in Selected Messages, Volume 1, there are very little changes being made to that letter. It is almost exactly the same. Very little changes. It's certainly not like the first manuscript we looked at a moment ago. That was really major reshaped. This one is not. There's barely anything being changed here. The editors, when they published Selected Messages Volume 1, felt like, well, the letter, let's have the letter stand as is. Let's just say it like it is. And no need of doing much editing here. The thought seems to be clear. The sentence seemed to be flowing in the proper order. And it's fine. Of course, Ellen White is not here anymore to do the editorial work on this page, which was the case in 1896 in the first example. When Selected Messages was published in the 50s or 60s, Ellen White is not around anymore to do that major kind of re-editing. So we don't do that anymore. So we just simply published it the same way as it is. Okay? But you kind of see that the handwriting is the same. The style is a little different. It seems to be a little more polished. Maybe she had more time to write this one than the first one and to think a little more about what she was doing. Let's go to the other page. This one, too, has two examples, and they're taken from the Desire of Ages. These two examples show slight editing also, very slight editing. It's not major, but there are two different examples. Let me start with the one on the left-hand side. It is a page from Desire of Ages, of the manuscript, of course, that was edited by Maggie Hare. Maggie Hare is a New Zealander who works for Ellen White while Ellen White is in Australia. Now, notice here what is happening. Ellen White has had the manuscript typed by a secretary, and then Maggie goes over it and she makes suggestions. If you look, some of the suggestions here are to eliminate the punctuation in the first line, to eliminate the conjunction and start a new sentence, or have ellipsis words and so on. A little further down, a couple lines down, you see a few words being scratched out, and the sentence starts a little differently. And in the middle, you see a couple circles of words that are moved to a different spot in the sentence. Now, there's one more thing I want you to notice. Beside every one of these corrections that Maggie here does, what do you notice? There's a dot. There's a dot. If we had the original, we would notice likely a change of ink. The dot is from Ellen White. She approves the change. She approves making that little correction, moving the words around, doing this, that, and the other. She approves that. And her way of noting that to Maggie was to put a dot. I agree. Boy, that's tedious work. A lot of tedious work. Look at the page beside. Look at the page right beside. This one is by Marion Davis. She's the one now who's doing the work. And Marion Davis is the most experienced editor that Ellen White has, literary assistant. Notice that she is suggesting also some revamping, some rearranging of some things. She's changing the verb tense sometimes in sentences. And she's scratching a few words there. In fact, she's scratching 3 lines out of this. But notice, there are no dots behind Marion Davis's suggestions. It is likely that Ellen White looked at them and then verbally to Marion or to the other assistant said, I agree with what's being done here. Go ahead. She did not work like this with Maggie here. Every single instance was noted and agreed to. With Marion Davis, a little more freer because she trusted the work she would do.
Was there ever an instance where she didn't agree?
Oh, yes. Yes, there are instances where she didn't agree. Yes, there are. Okay, so we see a lot of variety and diversity here of work that is being done. But I wanted to give you these examples here this afternoon just to give you the sense of what is happening. And there is work being done, and here's how it is done. It was not done in secret. It was done with Ellen White supervising the work being done by her assistants. So I think we can trust these volumes that we have. We can have confidence in them. Next week when we meet, we need to discuss one more subject regarding Ellen White's writings. And it is the subject of plagiarism. When she borrowed from non-Adventist or other Christian authors. We will see that subject a little later in the semester. I'll come back to that. Next week, we're going to deal with rules of hermeneutics and how to look at her writings. So have a good week.